20. "Still nothing!" exclaimed Alexander angrily, twisting his head to face Vitellius. The slave, who was halfway through shaving him, jerked the razor away in the nick of time, causing the morning light streaming in through the windows of the dressing room to flash on the sharp blade. The slave paled. He knew who would be punished if he cut the dictator, and it wouldn't matter whose fault it actually was. "Regrettably not, dictator," admitted Vitellius. "It might help, perhaps, if you were to make the matter public with a suitable announcement. That would clear up any confusion regarding the circumstances behind the search, and ensure maximum support and, hopefully, a speedier conclusion." "Yes, perhaps it is necessary now." Then Alexander frowned intently for a moment. "No," he said slowly, with growing annoyance. "Of course not. Do you think I want to look a fool, Vitellius? I do not understand." "Evidently not. What's the matter with you? Can't you see the consequences of—" "Are you finished?" The barber nodded dumbly, hastily gathered up his tools, and bowed himself out of the room. When they were alone, Alexander continued. "I can do nothing publicly now, Vitellius, not with Selene arriving. Caesarion is supposed to be there to greet her, remember? What kind of incompetent will I look like if I explain that I'm having him hunted down for suspected treason, but I can't find him for the moment? She'll make much of that story at my expense. And what sort of scene will there be if Caesarion actually appears and he's arrested in public? You know these things are best done discreetly, so the details can be arranged properly." He sighed heavily, then continued, as though explaining something to one who was proving disappointingly obtuse. "Caesarion alive and supporting me I would have welcomed. Caesarion dead by unknown hands, with suspicion gradually turning to Selene's agents, would be regrettable, but convenient in the longer term. Caesarion arrested a few hours ago on suspicion of treason and held safely incommunicado, I probably could explain. But Caesarion, who might appear at any time and perhaps make inconvenient allegations, that I would prefer to avoid. I'm surprised you couldn't see this for yourself." He considered Vitellius closely. "Perhaps you've been overworking. You might be losing your touch." Vitellius looked uncomfortable. "But what are the orders that were sent out with the guards, dictator?" "Oh, come now, Vitellius, what is the matter with you? Think boldly. Say the orders were misunderstood or misdrafted. After all, only a few people saw them in trying conditions. I was not seeking Caesarion for treason. I was trying to save him from it, after the attempt on his life. And whatever Caesarion says, he will have no proof if he is pursued no further. In fact, I'll welcome him with open arms." Alexander swelled with delight at his capacity for invention. "Yes, this is nearly as good as if he had died, because suspicion can still fall on Selene for the attempt. As long as the nature of the search for him is adjusted accordingly, and the error explained to those concerned, sincere apologies to those respectable persons who were troubled, a reprimand to the guards for not questioning such patently absurd orders. Yes, put it in hand straight away, Vitellius." "But I passed down those orders personally, dictator. If it's all now turned about and revealed as a mistake, I'll look a fool." "Not a mistake, Vitellius. An unfortunate misunderstanding. And surely it's better that you look a fool than I. After all, I'm a child of the gods. My divinity only awaits the recognition of the masses, as you keep telling me. I doubt if I'm actually capable of making a mistake. Wouldn't you agree?" Vitellius gaped helplessly for a moment, then slowly bowed his head. "It will be done as you say, dictator." The royal flagship Horus made a slow, deliberate pass over the capital before gracefully losing height and descending towards the landing field beyond the city walls. The morning sun caught its great hull, making it appear to glow magnificently in the sky as it turned, as no doubt was the intention of the maneuver. People in the streets stopped and stared at the sight, as no doubt was also the intention. It was far larger than any airship Rome had yet produced. Themos stared up into the sky with the rest, impressed despite himself. There was something awe-inspiring, and also frightening, about the sheer bulk of the craft as it droned overhead, its huge shadow rippling across the city as it descended, temporarily blotting out the sun. Many folk flocked to the walls or out onto the plain to watch the craft drop its mooring lines to the waiting ground crew and be gently eased forward until its nose mount locked with the coupling on the docking tower and the ship was safely berthed. Strabo, who had been looming behind him as he watched, and had uttered a brief, "Cool, big, ain't it?" now appeared to come out of his reverie and gently usher Themos on like an ungainly sheepdog. "Come on, Master Themos, you got to see lots of people and tell them all the things he's going to do for them." "Thank you. I'm quite aware of my objectives for the day," Themos responded testily. "May I remind you, I entered into this undertaking purely voluntarily, in the hope that the outcome would be of benefit to the common good." Strabo's eyes were glazing over, partly from the after-effects of the previous night's drinking, but mostly out of incomprehension. "Never mind," concluded Themos wearily. "Let's get on with it. And remember, when we reach the library, you stay outside. You block out too much light." Crouched in the shelter of the temple parapet, Perry was watching the debarkation of the royal party from the airship through binoculars. She could see a small cavalcade of carriages and what looked, from a distance anyway, to be decorated floats, waiting close by the airship. Obviously the visit had been prepared for, with Cleopatra Selene's personal entourage being sent on ahead ready to greet her. Perry thought of the barge she had seen gliding gracefully up the Nile. Someone like that, or their descendant, would never simply arrive anywhere. They would make an entrance. Perry tracked her binoculars along the road leading from the landing field to the city gates. It was already lined with soldiers and a few scattered groups of onlookers, but it was clear the main procession was going to be within the city itself. There was little of the route visible because of the intervening buildings, but through gaps between them and in open squares and parades, she could see flashes of colour as crowds started to gather. Yes, it was clearly going to be quite a spectacle. Pity she couldn't watch it from a little closer. She let her gaze drift across the city, imagining the scene at ground level amongst the crowds. The conditions should be ideal for Cassidorus's hirelings to get to work on Phase 1. "Say what you like about her, she puts on a good show," said the first man, raising his voice above the expectant hubbub of the crowd gathering in the shadow of the Arch of Antonius. "True enough," conceded the second man, "but I still don't hold with this Queen of the East business. So deify them after they're dead, okay, but not before. It don't feel right somehow." "But what if it's the will of the gods? I mean, look at the oracle. Pretty obvious that they're favoured, isn't it?" "Yeah, but if she's going to be queen here, then Alexander has to be king." "Emperor, you mean? It'll be a proper empire then." "All right, emperor then. Stands to reason." "What about Ptolemy?" interjected a stranger quickly from behind them. "Huh? What about him?" asked the first man. "Well, he's the elder, isn't he? He should be emperor first," pointed out the stranger. "What's he done to deserve it?" exclaimed the first man. "He only saved us from a civil war, didn't he? Remember a few years ago, when Alexander and Selene were at each other's throats, and we all thought, here we go again? But it was Ptolemy who patched it up. Credit where it's due, I say." He's got a point," admitted the second man. But the stranger had moved on, and was already talking to somebody else. "I was hoping to see Cleopatra's arrival and the parade," complained the doctor petulantly. "I was looking forward to it." Paulinus regarded him once again with amazed disbelief. "Tomorrow, you're going up against Gandos in the arena, and you're worried about missing a bit of pageantry?" And why shouldn't I worry about the parade? It's bound to be more pleasant than fighting Gandos. Which would you rather worry about missing? The little file of guards were marching the doctor to the city training compound of Alexander's own gladiatorial school. The street they were passing down was presently deserted. In the distance could be heard cheering and general merrymaking. The doctor's response reduced Paulinus to thoughtful silence until they reached the building. The compound was situated in a grand structure on the scale of a palace or public baths, except that the gates were far heavier and forbiddingly studded. Paulinus identified the doctor to the door guard, and they marched down a long hall. Gradually, the sound of combat became audible, the regular clash and ring of metal on metal, the dull thump of projectiles striking targets, the sporadic shouted commands of trainers, and the cries of men filled with bloodlust. Passing through an iron gate, the party emerged into the great central well of the building. Instead of enclosed garden courts or wide pools, there were several yards, divided by high, solid wooden fences, and surfaced with sand, like miniature arenas. Surrounding them were the exercise rooms, armory, smithy, kitchens, and living quarters for the gladiators and their trainers. While Paulinus went to find a particular instructor, the doctor slowly paced about, observing the combatants in the yards keenly, trailing his escort behind him as though they were an honour guard rather than his jailers. "Hi, Doctor!" Perry's voice sounded in his ear. "Oh, I guess this must be Alexander's gladiator school." "It is indeed," confirmed the doctor, mouthing the words. "And as you can see, lessons are in progress. I'm just waiting for them to find me a trainer." On the TARDIS's monitor, Perry could see several pairs of men engaged in trial combat scattered across the yards, while in the far corner were a row of targets for javelin, trident, and axe. She had intended to call the doctor with news of how the first phase of the campaign was proceeding, but now she hesitated. The scene before her brought home the reality and the danger of the task facing the doctor. This looks pretty serious stuff, Doctor. Perhaps this wasn't such a good idea after all? Look, we've got money in hand now. Maybe we can bribe your guards or something." "No," responded the doctor firmly. "We will stay with the plan. It would not be helpful to start another manhunt just now. By the way, what news of the search for Ptolemy?" "Well, there's been no public announcement that he's wanted for anything, and Ptolemy thinks that Alexander has chickened out or doesn't want a scene with his sister arriving any minute. But I'm making sure Ptolemy stays out of sight until we're certain of plenty of popular support." Her voice became concerned again. "Are you sure about going through with this?" "Yes. My only worry was that there might have been innovations in the way of weapons and techniques that would be new to me. But everything appears quite conventional. See the agile man in the first yard, fighting with a net and trident?" "Yes." "He's fighting in the style of a retinarius. His larger, more heavily armed opponent with the shield and axe is probably a Samnite. They liked to pit differently armed and weighted men together to contrast their skills and methods of fighting, you see. It made for better entertainment." "It's ghastly." "Yes," the doctor replied simply. "But it's how it was and is. Anyway, everything I can see here is quite familiar, and as the heyday of gladiatorial combat in actuality was still a century or two on, I'm hoping their technique won't be quite so advanced. Yeah, I think this is my personal trainer coming now." The doctor surreptitiously adjusted the control on his wristband as Paulinus returned in the company of a large man wearing a heavy leather tunic with a studded strap apron and carrying a stout cane in the manner of a swagger stick. The newcomer's face was thickly scarred and seemed to be set in a permanent scowl of disapproval. "This is Instructor Otho. He will see to your dress and weapons." "How do you do?" the doctor said, smiling politely. Otho ignored the greeting and instead walked around the doctor, examining him critically. "So, he grated, sarcastically, his voice as scarred as his features. "This is the man I'm supposed to train in one day to defeat Gandos. He's got some height to him, I grant, but he looks a bit flabby to me." He poked the doctor in the ribs with his cane. "Actually, I just need to use the facilities for a while. And don't do that again, there's a good chap. Can't take a little tickle, can you? Don't think you're going to last long." And he jabbed the doctor again. "Now, I did warn you about that," the doctor said sternly. "Warn me, did you?" Otho swung the cane back for a savage cutting blow. The doctor stepped quickly forward, blocked Otho's arm with one hand, and stabbed straight fingers into his neck with the other. Otho's knees sagged, and he slowly collapsed to the ground, eyes goggling, but unable to move a muscle, as the doctor maintained his immobilizing nerve pinch. "Don't you know it's bad manners to prod people like that?" the doctor admonished mildly, but with a steely undertone. "Now, be a sensible fellow, and just get me anything I need," he added amiably. "Have another word with Paulinus about how well Alexander expects me to perform tomorrow. You wouldn't want to inconvenience the star turn, would you?" Otho gurgled incoherently. The doctor seemed to accept this as acquiescence, and gently lowered him to the ground. Then the doctor walked away to examine the armory, snapping his fingers to attract the attention of his dumbstruck guards, and encouraging them to fall in behind him. Various gladiators watched on with equal amazement. Sympathetically, Paulinus bent over and helped the dazed Otho to his feet. "You're lucky," he said. "At least he didn't keep shouting 'Hi!' all the time. It's terrible when he does that." In the doctor's ear, Perry was almost shouting herself. "That was wonderful! I didn't know you knew Kung Fu." "Actually, though I did study martial arts in the East once, that particular hold was based on Venusian karate techniques. I'm not really as competent as I'd wish in the discipline, but then I haven't actually got the correct number of limbs." Perry laughed. "Well, you've sure got everything tied up here. I guess I can safely leave you and check on how the Whispering campaign's going." "Yes, I'll be busy here for a while. Sorry to miss the parade, though." The narrower streets had garlands slung across them, and every commemorative bust or statue of Antonius and Cleopatra was hung about with collars of flowers. As the sound of the procession grew close, the people started to wave coloured streamers in the air. It had been declared a holiday, and they were out to enjoy themselves, and if that meant waving to Cleopatra Selene, so be it. There were 10 days of games and other entertainments to come, many sponsored by her, so they were content to give her a friendly welcome. Much to Strabo's delight, but Themos's annoyance, they were caught in the crowds on a corner and had to wait until the procession passed before heading for their next destination. Themos consoled himself with the thought that time in the library had been well spent, and he had spread the word about Ptolemy being keen to sponsor a new seat of learning in the city. If only a few he had talked to passed the word on, and the story was repeated in turn, a considerable number of the intellectual class would have heard it by nightfall. Geometric progression and the urge to gossip were the cornerstones of the first part of the campaign. The sound of drums and horns grew louder. A rank of soldiers appeared bearing banners, each soldier dressed in the uniform of one of the provinces of the south. A lightly stepping line of dancing girls followed, each holding a basket from which they strew petals before them. The baskets of the row behind contained candied sweets, which they cast into the crowd. Then came a marching column of musicians, playing drums, cymbals, and curling serpent horns in a continuous fanfare punctuated by a regular clash of percussion. Behind them came a troop of tumblers and jugglers who sprang and cartwheeled down the street. They were followed by a dozen fire-eaters, which brought appreciative gasps from the children in the crowd. Then came a row of carts bearing caged animals. There were snarling and frightened lions, tigers, and a monstrous crocodile. After these came exotic beasts from the far south. a white rhino sporting 3 massive horns, a mad-eyed ostrich fully 15 feet tall, and a clutch of beetles the size of dogs that chittered and scurried about their cage, the sun sparkling on their glossy shells. Then there were more musicians, followed by another company of dancers strewing more petals. Then came Cleopatra Selene herself. Heads tilted back, and all eyes were raised. How clever, thought Themos. What excellent psychology. She rode above them in a magnificently gilded throne, which was suspended beneath a miniature version of the airship Horus, over 40 feet long, drawn by a company of slaves holding golden tether lines. There was a moment's silence as each new section of the crowd spied her approach, then a roar of appreciative applause. Themos had a brief glimpse of an attractive, strong-featured woman in classical gown and Egyptian headdress, who bestowed minimal waves to left and right with graceful condescension. Then she had passed over them, gliding in perfect serenity down the street, trailed by another company of banner-wielding soldiers, and was gone. Slowly, the sound of music and cheering died away. Strabo came out of the daze the spectacle had cast over his simple mind, to find one man in the dispersing crowd still enthusiastically waving his streamer and calling out Cleopatra's name. Guiltily recalling his new allegiance, he placed a huge hand on the man's shoulder and applied his own form of elementary psychology. "Let's hear a cheer for Ptolemy now, mate, or else..." On the steps of the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus, Alexander stood ready to wish his sister a public and most insincere welcome. He heard the growing cheers accompanying her approach. What sort of display was she making of herself this time? The procession wound its way slowly into the plaza before the temple, and the crowd there became equally expressive. When he saw Selene's mode of transport, he beckoned urgently to Vitellius. "I want one just like that, only bigger." Then Alexander put on his noblest face and stepped towards the microphones, making a little lifting gesture to the operator who stood by the glowing boxes of amplifier valves as he did so. Egypt might have larger airships, but Selene would learn that Rome had the louder public address system. Cassiodorus was eating a quick meal with as much attention to his table manners as if it were a banquet at the finest house in Rome. He was eating from the same table as Ptolemy Caesar, consul of Rome. At least, they were both eating a hasty meal while standing, from platters of cold sliced meat, cheese, and hard bread set on the same rough table. Even campaigners had to pause some time to eat. But it was almost the same thing. Well, the man wasn't stuck up, he'd say that for him. This must be the sort of thing they did in the army, Cassiodorus thought vaguely. Commander shows his comradeship with the men before the big battle, and this was certainly a sort of battle they were in now, weren't they? Well, it sounded like it should be that way, though he was a little unsure of such details, having steered studiously clear of military duty all his life. "Have the letters been passed on yet, Cassiodorus?" Ptolemy asked between bites. Cassiodorus tried to clear his mouth quickly, and almost choked. Spraying crumbs, he said, "Yes, cough, consult, cough, all that we, cough, could get to. Some of your friends are still being watched. Not by the Praetorians, though. These are in civvies. But have the notes to the country gone out successfully?" "Oh yeah, they were no problem." "Good. Don't waste any more time trying to deliver further notes to addresses in the city. I can arrange for those to be passed on by special means tonight. Now, what about the crowds for tomorrow?" "I've set Decius and Tyro onto that. You'll have the best support as money can buy, if you'll pardon me. And we've got some people in a shop making up those banners like you wanted. Be obliged if you check they're written right later, if you would, sir. Only my spelling ain't what you'd call too good, not having had much schooling, as it were." Ptolemy smiled understandingly. You have other talents, Cassidorus, which more than compensate. A group was sitting in the Brown Bear after the parade, contemplating the celebrations still to come. Didn't she look amazing, sitting up there, floating along like that? I dunno, I got a crick in my neck. But it was style, wasn't it? Just show, said the stranger dismissively. None of them actually remembered inviting him, but he had generously brought the round, so commanded token respect. Well, here's to more like it then, I say, said the appreciator of style. They tipped their mugs back. What I mean, continued the stranger, is that it's very easy to be dazzled by appearances like all the other plebs, and be taken in by... Who's being taken in? Not me, mate. I think for myself. You can't buy my support like that. I mean, a few cheers, okay, but not deep down, you know. Here's to free thinking, someone said, and they tipped their mugs again. Ah, exclaimed the stranger, I can guess who you really support then. You can? By your own reason, it must be Ptolemy Caesar. He just gets quietly on with his duties in a dignified manner, and doesn't try to influence the easily led with a bit of show, or offend more discerning folk like ourselves. Here's to the memory of his noble father. They tipped their mugs again, and found them empty. No, don't you worry. It's my round again. The messenger, who arrived at the gates of the country villa, lying in the plain of the Tiber some 9 miles north of Rome, was scruffy but insistent. The communication he bore had to be delivered personally and at once. Finally, Glabrio's secretary was persuaded to quietly enter his master's study to find the old man dozing in his chair. Your pardon, master? Glabrio blinked awake and straightened himself, brushing the few white hairs that fringed his bald pate. Yes, Melos. What is it? He mumbled. There is a strange man outside with a message, master. I believe it is important. He mentioned the name of Consul Ptolemy. What? Glabrio was suddenly alert. Is it a response to my complaint about the soldiers this morning? You did send my letter? I did, master. But this man is certainly no official. Well, bring him in then. The man, in fact, was clearly a commoner, judging by his cheap, soiled tunic and travel-stained cloak. But there was sharpness and self-possession in his manner that refused to be overawed by his surroundings, and he strutted up to Glabrio's desk like a bantam. You Senator Aulus Severus Glabrio? He asked, with disconcerting frankness. I am, responded Glabrio haughtily. I understand you have a message for me, my good man. I ain't anybody's good man, the messenger replied proudly, drawing a folded and sealed letter from a pocket concealed within his tunic. I just get paid to do a job, see? He handed the letter over. I've got to watch you read it, then take back a word you'll give me, that's all. And he waited patiently and unmoving, while Glabrio, a touch myopically, read the contents. At length the senator looked up, his manner subtly altered. Thank you for bringing this to me. The word is understood. Understood. Right, I got it. And the messenger turned on his heel without another word and strode from the room. What a singular person, Melos observed. Never mind him, said Glabrio crisply, his rheumy eyes alight with purpose. There's work to be done. We leave for Rome at dawn tomorrow, Melos. You must arrange transport. Certainly, master. For how many? Oh, everyone who can be spared from the house and estate. Master? You heard me. All the most able-bodied servants and workers, and my family, of course, but not the youngsters. We'll have to find some sort of treat for them here. He looked at Melos's uncomprehending face. Tomorrow has been declared a holiday, has it not? Well, we're going to celebrate it, in a manner of speaking. But first there are messages to be sent. Find some of the younger lads to act as runners, Melos, and some riders too. I'm not sure we can reach all in time, but we'll try. Wish my son were here. Have you paper to hand? Good. The first is to old Rufinus. His farm is not far away." The yard rang with the clash of axe on shield as the two combatants surged to and fro across the sand. Around them, other gladiators watched appreciatively, shouting out their encouragement or advice. At last, one fighter's shield was knocked from his grasp. A second blow sent him sprawling onto his back, with the spike of his opponent's axe at his throat. "I yield! I yield!" he called out. There was a burst of applause from the onlookers. The axe was withdrawn, and his opponent pulled off his broad protective practice helmet to reveal the sweat-streaked face of the doctor, creased into an amiable smile after his workout. He reached out and gave a comradely hand up to his beaten sparring partner. "That was a good fight, Sinon. Thank you." "No," exclaimed the other. "'Tis I who should thank you, Doctor, for I have learned the lesson. But where did you master those touches of footwork and such novel use of the backswing?" "Oh, here and there, don't you know? I have travelled quite widely." They walked over to a water butt, acknowledging the compliments of the other gladiators, drank thirstily, and splashed water over themselves to cool down, for the sun still blazed into the yards. They sat on a shaded bench for a moment with some of the others, resting between bouts, watching the continuing practice sparring. Nobody troubled them. The trainers and overseers were giving the doctor a respectfully wide berth. Metaphorically, the doctor was resting his mind as well, sitting back in a corner of his own consciousness with his feet up, as it were, and letting the personality of his third incarnation handle the physical side of things, and strike up a bonhomie with his fellow gladiators. It was hard to believe that men who might be dead the next day could still find time for humour and a strange sort of fellowship, but such was the case. Human beings never ceased to amaze him. The only annoying aspect of the arrangement was that his former personality kept telling him he ought to watch their weight a bit. "I wish you luck against Gandos," continued Sinon, "but if you should beat him, I hope I'm not the next to be pitted against you, for then I would truly be facing the finest gladiator in the world." Sinon was one of the gladiators scheduled to fight later. The doctor smiled grimly, reflecting how strange it was to sit next to a man in good fellowship who might feel obliged to try to kill him for the sake of entertainment the next day. "I assure you, Sinon, this will be my only fight. I have other matters to attend to after this." "I thought like that once, the first time I won enough to clear my debts and obligations to the school. But I came back, didn't I? You get a taste for it, you see. I'll probably die in the arena," Sinon observed matter-of-factly. He was, the doctor had discovered, a free man who had enrolled as a gladiator out of necessity. Most of the others in the school were slaves or criminals who had taken a slim chance of winning freedom against other, more certain punishments. "Are you still going to use that odd weapon you've got the armourer making for you?" Sinon asked. "Yes, it should be ready shortly. Most of the parts were to hand. They just need assembling properly." "But you're so skilled with an axe." "So, I hear, it is Gandos. But he won't have seen anything like this, or be familiar with how it is best used. That will be my first advantage." Sinon rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Yeah, I begin to see your strategy. Well, it is free choice of weapons, so I suppose it's up to you. I hope at least you wear him down a little to give the rest of us a chance." "Well, I certainly won't beat Gandos by acting as though he was invincible. The way you talk, it seems as though he's the most dangerous adversary ever to step out into the arena." "Amongst men, perhaps he is. Truth be told, the thing I would fear to face most is a pack of animals. Tigers, jackals, or wolves, perhaps. You can handle one or two, but the rest will always get you. And you can never be sure of what they're going to do. You may think you can read a man's mind, and know if the next strike is going to be a feint or the real thing, but with animals there's always uncertainty, and it's up to the gods and fate whether you live or die." The doctor looked deeply thoughtful, as an idea had struck him. "Thank you, Sinon," he said. "That was a most illuminating and valuable observation." "It was?" he laughed. "I must be careful, then. It doesn't do too much to think in this game." "And how is the trainee gladiator?" inquired Paulinus, ambling over from the shelter of the cool colonnade where he had spent most of the day to make a periodic check on the doctor's progress. He was still clinging to his discontent as a matter of pride, but the sarcasm in his remarks had been steadily diminishing. "Fine, thank you, Captain. Everybody has been most cooperative. I hope you've placed your bet as I advised." Paulinus scowled. "What's this special weapon you've had them make for you?" "The dictator didn't say anything about any special weapon." "Neither did he say anything against one. Besides, if it helps me win, I don't think he's going to complain. Now, if you'll excuse me, I want to prepare myself to use it." And he got up and walked over to a deserted corner of the yard. Paulinus frowned. It almost looked as though he were talking to himself. "Hello, Perry. Are you there?" "Hi, Doctor. Everything okay?" "Yes, but I've just had an idea for something that might possibly come in handy on the off chance. Have you got the recorder on?" "Okay, it's running now." "I want you to go to the lab and mix the following chemicals." Through the steamy air of the calidarium of the Thermae of Antonius, a debate was taking place. The senator lifted himself onto one elbow and stared curiously at the man sprawled on the heated marble slab opposite. "Just what are you inferring, young man?" he asked intently. "All I meant was perhaps now would be a good time to make a choice in the best interests of the stability of the Dominion. And I supporting Ptolemy Caesar? Yeah. Soon it'll be time again to confirm Alexander in his position as dictator for another year. Pure formality, as we all know. Equally, Ptolemy will hold his position of honorary first consul, and Cleopatra Selene will remain queen of the eastern provinces. We don't mind what she calls herself out there, as long as she's content to remain one of the triumvirate here. But be honest, do you think it's going to continue that way for much longer? Everybody knows Alexander wants to be declared emperor, and there's never been any doubt about Cleopatra's desires. Now, do I not speak the truth?" The senator grunted noncommittally. The man was a stranger, and did not realize how well aware he was of the pressures that were being brought to bear over the matter from both sides. "Two strong leaders, Alexander and his sister. But is the Dominion large enough to contain both their ambitions?" The senator looked hastily about him, but they were alone in the cubicle at present. It was one of several that opened onto the circular hot pool, the rising steam from which was tinted by the light of the glass brick panels in the dome above it. There were a score of bathers presently visible, either lying in other cubicles or easing themselves down into the water, but none were within earshot, he was relieved to note. This sort of talk might be misunderstood. "So, what is it exactly you are suggesting?" he asked carefully. "Oh, nothing dramatic," the other replied reassuringly. "Just that Ptolemy Caesar be made aware of his responsibilities, that's all." "And by that you mean—" The man rolled over to face him, apparently surprised his meaning was unclear. "Why, to take a stronger position in government, of course, and keep his two younger kin in check. After all, he's got maturity and experience that they lack. Trouble is, he's been too modest, or perhaps self-effacing, to accept the fact lately. I think somebody should remind him of his duty. That's all." And the man got off the slab and walked down into the clear hot water of the pool. A few minutes later, the senator noted him talking casually to another bather. In fact, he recalled seeing him chatting to others earlier, so it didn't seem as though he had specially singled him out. Perhaps the man simply liked the sound of his own voice. Still, there was something in what he said. A little moderation might not be a bad thing right now. Then it came to him. that he has heard Ptolemy's name mentioned in passing a few times today. He couldn't think where, though. Marius Ruffinus was driving his cattle in for their evening milking when he heard his wife calling his name. He saw her half running across the field from their little farmhouse, her skirts gathered in one hand, and waving something in the air with the other. He ran to meet her as she panted up to him. "What's the matter, woman?" he exclaimed. She could hardly speak, but thrust a sealed letter into his hands. "Said it was very important, from your old legate." He tore the paper open and read the contents slowly. His face set. "So, he's going to make a move at last," he muttered. "What is it, Marius? Is it bad news?" "For some, maybe." He frowned, then appeared to come to a decision. "You take the cattle in, Julia. Get Lucio to help you. I've got to get a shovel." "But what for, Marius?" "To dig something up with, of course. Something I thought I might need one day. And you'd better pack a meal for me tomorrow. I'll be off to Rome first thing." The triclinium of Alexander's palace rang with the sound of 200 people making after-dinner conversation. The main courses had long since been consumed, and the rest of the evening belonged to wine, the picking away at sweet titbits, idle chatter, and entertainment. A small galaxy of wire light bulbs gave brilliant illumination to the U-shaped formation of tables, flanked either side by reclining couches for the male diners, and chairs for the woman, as was traditional. Within the hollow of the U, dancers from the southern lands swayed sensuously to the rhythm of pipes and drums, their oiled bodies glistening in the light. Around the perimeter of the hall, acrobats built human pyramids and tumbled, and jugglers of flaming torches strode to and fro. Later, when the hours at last began to weigh on the diners, the more energetic entertainers would depart, and a renowned poet and storyteller would come and recount to them classic Greek verses and legendary tales. And so, in mellower mood, they would depart. But for now, Alexander and Selene faced each other across the table, a quiet oasis amid the babble, and exchanged the knowing smiles of two players in a dark and intricate contest. "I trust Ptolemy will present himself soon," she said conversationally. "I almost found myself missing him today. He's usually so correct in attending such functions. Remind me, what business was it that called him away?" "Oh, you know, dear Caesarion. So serious. It was probably something quite trivial, but he had obligated himself, that sort of thing." "Well, will he be with us for the games tomorrow?" "I really don't know. He might not realize how important an occasion it is." "Quite," Selene agreed with a smile. "He does have trouble with his sense of proportion. He never could recognize when to ignore a truth in order to pay proper attention to the vital trivialities." They both enjoyed a brief moment of mutual understanding. "By the way, an amusing incident, sister," said Alexander. "I came across a rogue trying to learn the secrets of the oracle the other night. I don't suppose you know anything about him?" Cleopatra Selene paused in the act of sipping from her glass, her fine, imperious features flickering momentarily with concern. "He did not damage the oracle?" Alexander regarded her narrowly. "No, he was just over-curious, I believe. It did occur to me that you might know something of him," he said innocently. "Nothing," she said simply and flatly. "You know, I think I believe you. I had wondered about him because he was a Greek and might have come from Alexandria. What was his name now? Decton. No, Doctor. That was it." Selene's knuckles tightened about her glass. "What did you do with him?" she asked levelly. "Oh, I was most generous. His efforts to escape from my men were so amusing, I decided to give him a chance to save his skin. He'll be the first to face Gandos tomorrow. He sounds most intriguing. If he is so amusing, I would be interested to meet him too. You will tomorrow? No, before then. I doubt if Gandos will leave much of him to be amusing. Well, I dare say it can be arranged, if you're so interested. He is certainly an original character. If he can be sent to my apartments, then... Alexander smiled. And have you play any of your tricks to weaken him before the fight? Oh no, if you want to meet him so badly, you'll have to go to him, and not without my men keeping watch, mind. Very well, brother. It shall be as you wish. They're not coming again, are they, mother? Asked Agricola anxiously, as she bid him good night. No, my son, they will not come again. You can rest easily. They said they were after Ptolemy. I heard them. Have they found him? No, that was all a mistake. They explained it later. Ptolemy is all right, then? Yes, I'm sure he is fine. Don't trouble yourself about it any more. It wasn't because of what I did, was it? No, she said firmly. Agricola hung his head as though from shame. I left Ptolemy once, he began. Please, Lucius, not again. Shouldn't have run away. I let him down. There were these terrible creatures, and I was so frightened. His mother pulled him to her and comforted him as though he were a child. Don't think about it now. Be calm. It's all in the past. Don't worry. I'll never do it again. Never.